I tell you, it's amazing how you kind of get some ideas of things you want to talk about, and all of a sudden life happens, right? I don't know if she told you or not, but today's one of those days for me personally where life just happened. And it's very unfortunate. It's very sad that I just on a daily basis really see the results of drugs in our lives today. And unfortunately, a gentleman today lost his life because of drugs. He literally got beaten to death in his cell because his cellmate was on drugs. And he was beaten to death in his cell. Very tragic, very, very sad. And then to have to, we locked the whole unit down, so 2,900 men are locked down. And there's just this air of over the whole place. 90% of the time, I don't know where I work because I'm hanging around guys who are trying to get better, and I'm trying to help them, and I don't recognize the any of the danger at all. I really don't. I mean, I'm walking around the prison, just like I'm standing in front of you right now. All the other guys are dressed up in, the big SWAT suits and all that kind of stuff, and I just don't do that. I'm just reminded how those guys, placed in a very small cell, were living together for a while. And this guy was serving, I think he's on 7 years of a 75-year sentence. So he's really not going anywhere. He's really not going anywhere now. So I waited until they moved him within the prison. I think I've told you we have jail within the prison. And so I was visiting some of the guys in jail, the guys who tried to commit suicide. So we have a whole wing where guys have tried to commit suicide. And those guys are stripped buck naked, thrown into an ice cold cell with absolutely nothing. Right? Literally absolutely nothing. And just starts no mattress, no pillow, not a stitch of clothing, nothing. So they're in there, and I'm going around trying to talk to these guys and pray with these guys, right? And some of them are there because they fear their safety. So they go to a particular office in the prison and file a complaint. So they just take them both out of the cells and they throw them both buck naked into another cell individually. No questions asked. So some of those guys hadn't really tried to hurt themselves, but they're there for their own safety. But then a couple of guys I spoke to had really tried to hurt themselves. Fortunately, they were in a state of regret. Then they pulled this young man in who murdered this gentleman this morning, and I was able to go and try to talk to him. Get sobered up a bit. And so as I was screaming through the door, trying to ask him his name, he goes, "My name is Jesus Christ. What's yours?" I'm Chaplain Davis. After that, he gave me a long litany of words I'm not going to use in here. Told me what I could go do to myself, which I think is physically impossible to do what he suggested I do to myself. So nevertheless, that was not the proper time to try to talk to this gentleman. But physically, emotionally, and spiritually, that gentleman is enslaved. And I guess in some areas, we can decide today in our lives, physically, we have freedom. You may be in a beautiful house with other ladies, but you have your freedom to go around, right? Comparatively speaking, you're very free physically, right? And so I guess what we have to kind of examine within ourselves coming out of addiction and alcoholism is, where are we emotionally and spiritually? How free are we there? And I'll be honest with you all, this past week, I've been able to walk around physically and be free and all that kind of stuff, but I have been wrapped up in my feelings. I have been enslaved in my own thinking. And I've got a minute or two of recovery under my belt, right? So it happens to us all. No one is immune getting wrapped up into the daily trials and tribulations of life. The point that we have to recognize is, though, is what I do with it. Remember we talked a couple weeks ago about Jim and what he did with his deal is he went out to try to sell a car. And so Jim was wrapped up in himself, probably having some resentments, and he went out and thought that whiskey and milk would be a good idea, right? Yeah. Right? It just doesn't work that way. Well, I was going to talk about Fred tonight, he's the next story in the book. And what Fred had done is he was a man who had a well-known, he was in an accounting firm. He was doing very well, okay? Had a lot of great things going for him, college kids. I mean, his life looked great, but yet he suffered from alcoholism. He didn't recognize it, though. So he was confronted. He went to the hospital because he had a bad case of nerves, right? I can remember in my first treatment center in 2001, I was a member of our homeowners association, so we were having a board meeting. This was at the first week of September, and I was telling them, I'm going to a treatment center in Wickenburg, Arizona, because my nerves are a little frazzled. I'm just having some nerve issues, right? Use the same exact excuse that Fred used, right? So I'm traveling 2,000 miles, spending $31,000 because I have a nerve disorder, right? That's what I told myself. And I was convinced that that's why I was going to treatment, right? So Fred was confronted with the same issue, right? They sent him off to get detoxed, and he goes, oh, I'm just having a bad case of nerves. A lot going on in my life, right? And the doctor actually said, you know what, bro? You're full of you know what? You may have this disease called alcoholism. No. Just a bad case of nerves. Then some couple people from AA came to talk to him. No. Just a bad case of nerves. So you see, he was taking this disease, this thinking, this physical allergy, and not making a big deal out of it. Right? Kind of like I said about the MRI way back. I got this. So he wasn't making a big deal out of it. He was lying to himself. So in essence, he was enslaved by his own thinking. He wasn't able to differentiate the true from the false because he was trapped in this right here. So the story goes is that he went like a year or so after he got dried out, about a year or so without drinking at all. Well, people from AA are full of it. They don't know what they're talking about. That doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. So he thought that all this was hocus pocus BS from the doctors and people in AA. Then he's on a business trip in Washington, D.C. How glorious is that, right? Crosses the thresholds of the hotel bar and has dinner and then sits down and thinks a highball before dinner will be a good idea. Then a highball after dinner. Then he takes a walk, comes back, and has a couple of more, and that's all he remembers. And the next thing you know, he's off on another deal. Right? Was he free? Absolutely not. He had a lot of money. You know, sitting there looking at him from the outside, if he came walking in right now, he may look great. But he wasn't free. And that's something that as alcoholics and addicts, we have to be careful about our thinking. And that's what we've been kind of focusing on, changing our movies and recognizing that the movie of my life is not full of truth. That the movie of my life has convinced me that everything is okay. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, everything is okay. And I'm buying into this movie of life that everything is okay, just like Fred, just like Jim. And before long, I'm in a hopeless state of mind and body. They didn't have a solution, right? They didn't have the steps, and so they didn't have a solution, so that's why they went back out. Believing the lie, they didn't know any better, so drinking and drugging was their solution. I work with 4 guys on Saturday morning, taking them through the steps, right? And they're, for the most part, staying very sober. But they're telling me that they're having this temptation to use. Now, those of you who've been through the steps, when you hit steps 4 and 5, that's when you really want to kind of start using again, right? I don't know if you ever bounced out on 4 and 5. That's kind of where these gents are. They're kind of out on 4 and 5, right? But I got to tell the story of a gentleman who is in Aryan Brotherhood. He's been in fights. He's Just a horrible, horrible childhood. His dad would beat him up. Just, I'm not even going to get into the details. Just a horrible childhood, right? So he's pretty, he tattoos everywhere. I mean, he's a badass, right? Nobody wants to mess with this dude. He's huge, right? So he's telling me, and we're talking about a fear inventory, right? And he's telling me about how when he was growing up, in one of his fights in like first or second grade, he got beat up. And his dad picked him up and took him to the house of the kid who beat him up. And his dad knocked on the door and said, my kid is going to fight your kid one more time. He got beat up again. On the way home, his dad said, if you ever lose a fight again, you're going to fight me. You're going to fight me. So at that point, in that little mind, something clicked, and he said he could never lose a fight again. He hadn't lost a fight again, right? So we're going through the steps, and we're working on our fear inventory, right? And he's talking about some issues that are coming up there on the unit. And his first thought, his movie is to go back and beat the you-know-what out of guys. That's what he knows to do when he's threatened, when he gets backed in a corner, when he gets in fear, his fists come up and he comes out fighting, right? So he's telling me this in our meeting Saturday about what's going on in his world, right? And he goes, Chaplain, it's just this energy, this feeling was just coming up, and I wanted to fight. I wanted to use. But then he goes, you know what I realized? I said, what? He goes, that's a fear. What? He goes, I just wanted to try to be a bigger, badder, and threaten this guy who was threatening me because I was in fear. So instead of looking at his movie and just, knocking the door out of somebody, no, I think they say knock the brakes off of them or something is what they say. Beat the brakes off of them. Instead of beating the brakes off the guy, he stood back, went through the process of recovery, and goes, you know what? I was just really afraid. You don't hear that coming out of that man's mouth very often. He's afraid of nothing. He does have the opportunity to step back and examine it. He doesn't have to, get in and instigate or anything. And that's what he's doing, you see? So the lie came up to him, right? The entrenchment, the enslavement of that thinking, that movie appeared to him, right? And that's what he was going to do, was get in that fight. But then he goes, you know what? I don't like this movie. He got up, went in, did some action, thought about it, went and sat down and looked at another movie. But so he's sitting in another movie theater now, right? He's recognizing the fear. Now, he would have beat the brakes off the guy, and I would have seen him today in jail. That would have been his option. Beat the brakes off the guy, and they'd put him in jail, right? But instead, he's talking about it, okay? He has a sense of freedom, and he's locked up for 337 years is his sentence. And he experienced freedom. How awesome is that? And then his dad came to visit him last weekend, right? And every time his dad hadn't seen him in probably 2 years, his mom will visit him over the video thing and all that kind of stuff. And so his mom always talks for his dad. Can you imagine that? He'll ask his dad a question and mom speaks for his dad. Right? They're sitting there together. His mom always speaks up for his dad. So he asked his dad a question and mom started speaking up. He goes, wait a minute. I want to hear it from my dad. His dad spoke to him. Then they got up. They were actually visiting in person. They got up to leave. He's never hugged his dad. His dad never hugged him back. He got up to hug his dad. His dad did not hug him back. He goes, Dad, I'm your little boy. And he squeezed him tighter. And then his dad squeezed him. So the first time in years, they had an embrace, an emotional embrace. That's what recovery will do. That's what going through this stuff will do. Instead of beating the brakes off the guy, he's feeling And this is a scary dude to have feelings. But it's beautiful to see that, right? So he has experienced this sense of freedom that so many of us don't experience by simply following some of the simple things that we outline for you. I'm telling you, it works. This stuff really works. He recognized his powerlessness. He reached out to God of his understanding. He turned his will and his life over to that God. And now he's looking at this stuff within himself. And it's not pleasant. Me sitting there bawling his eyes out talking to me. I'm bawling my eyes out talking to him. You don't see two big dudes in prison bawling, hugging each other. The guards come in. Is everything okay? Everything okay? Yeah, everything's great. Everything's great. Just two dudes in prison having an emotional experience. It was beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Did you forget that? Oh, okay. So that's what this deal freedom is about. So we're, our mind can trick us into thinking certain things, just like it's not a big deal, like Fred had. I got this on my own. I can do all this stuff. But the book talks about how when he got back into the recovery, that he began to recognize and have a deep sense of spirituality that he only thought he had as a, quote, Christian in church. Right? And he said his whole life, his whole persona, his whole way of thinking totally changed. Caleb's whole life, Caleb's whole way of thinking is beginning to change. And you know what's even interesting? Is that guy in Bravo 23 cell that killed that guy today, the same opportunity is going to be available for him to change if he wants it. If he wants it. And I'm going to be there to present it to him. Time and time and time again. I've never met Jesus Christ in person before. Felt pretty honored by that today. He's kind of short. He's kind of short. He wears white boxers. Didn't see that one coming. Didn't see that one coming. So that's when we get into the idea of freedom and the way our thinking changes. When we get into these steps, it just happens. The 10th step says over and over again, it just happens. Once we begin to do the work, it just happens. I didn't try to get into Caleb's brain. God did. I didn't try to get into his heart. God did. That's the beauty of this whole deal, whole stuff. So even today, when I'm wrapped up in my emotions and I'm wrapped up in my feelings, right? The last week or so, being a 58, almost 59-year-old man, it ain't easy. I'll be honest with y'all. It ain't easy. Things are beginning to fall apart, right? And I'm a dude, and you guys know my story. I'm a dude that physical prowess, physical strength was a large part of what I held my self-esteem in. And it's deteriorating. It really is. So I'm having to step back and take a look at myself and find worth, not in my strength as a physical man, but in other areas. And that's a challenge for me. And it hurts. Because I've always been able to pick up anything I wanted to pick up and do whatever I wanted to do. Last Tuesday, Wednesday, I got back problems, right? I'm out cutting my yard, pushing the mower in the back. And I'm crying my eyes out. I got snot coming out my nose. I am just crying my eyes out because I realize I can't do this much longer. And that's something I've done all my life, is work in the yard and cut grass. I made a living as a little boy, as a teenager, cutting grass, right? And I realized my days are numbered in regards to that. And so that passing, those of you who are a little bit older know what I'm talking about. That passing can be very painful. I have an opportunity to sit back and to pray, to talk to somebody about it, to feel the feeling. It's okay to feel it. It's okay to feel poopy. Right? It's okay. I don't have to be happy, joyous all the time. Right? I felt poopy. I have felt poopy today. But here I am with you, able to share that with you. and it begins to go away. It begins to kind of take care of itself when I do that. So this is putting how the program works. This is how getting out of that old theater and sitting in a new theater and allowing my mind to experience something new works. It's really awesome. So now I have this movie I'm watching, and I can watch another one. And it just gets better and better. If I allow it, life will just get better and better and better, regardless of the circumstances that I go through. I didn't say circumstances get better and better. Life gets better and better. When I go through the circumstances, sober, free, life gets better. Now, enough of me. We have a couple of ladies in here, I'm going to put on the spot, that have celebrated their annual birthdays. Is that right? Oh, wow. That is a kick chip. Got to be careful. I'm watching my language. I'm going to put that right in your, it's right there. It's okay. Nobody, you want to stand here with you? You're going to be by yourself.
Oh, I'll be fine.
Yeah, I know
Pass that
you will.
around so everybody can see it.
Okay.
It's really neat. It's really neat. Just make sure I get it back, please.
That's how you did it, girl.
All right, my journey started June. I'm Christy. I'm an alcoholic addict.
Hey, Christy.
My journey started June 17th, 2022. I mean, a lot led up to it. I'm way far away from home, away from my family. I'm from Houston. Why you put me on the spot?
It's just the way I roll.
How'd I do it? DWC. DWC, God, working the steps. I mean, the promises that are in AA and NA, that they happen. They're real, as long as you're working the steps. If you don't work the steps, the promises just fall off. You don't feel them, you don't see them, you don't know them. And that's about all I got, guys.
Okay. Well done. Thank you. Well, let's circle them up and close them up. We'll rock it next week. Ladies, you have a great day tomorrow. Good luck. Enjoy your 4th if you're off. Enjoy the fireworks and all that kind of good stuff. And remember, let's stay free upstairs in the brain, shall we? All right. You have a blessed. Thank you. Yes, it's an interesting evening. Y'all be blessed, okay? All right. Who is large and in charge?
Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you're worth it.